Welcome to Tales from Flat Space, a podcast of science fiction and fantasy by yours truly, Gina A. Pond. Just know that the stories in this podcast may contain content that could be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. So this is part 3, Chaos, chapter 44, Bill. Fucking political bitch, putting us in detention when he came back unharmed, not even willing to listen to anything we had to say. I was pacing back and forth in the cell that John and I had been shoved into. The man was infuriating calm about the whole thing. Relax, Bill, we'll get it done. I stopped and stared at him. Don't you ever get pissed off? Occasionally, but people around me usually don't survive the experience. That's where the clinically insane thing comes in. John just smiled. Gave me the chills. I sat on the bunk across from him. You do realize Genovian Union has provisions for this sort of thing? I leaned back and rolled my eyes. Damn, I'm getting rusty in my old age. Well, if you had had Sun Tzu training... Oh, shut up, I snapped. John just chuckled. We both stayed quiet after that, since we knew that it would be useless to say anything more with the rooms monitored. Then there was a noise outside the door. Provisions? I asked. John nodded. The cell door opened, and Ebo was standing there with a pulse pistol. Well, Mr. Smith and Sexy Bill, shall we get going? The thin man said. Ebo, Mr. Smith said in an annoyed tone. I opened my mouth and shut it, not quite sure whether to be flattered or pissed off. I opted just to not say anything and followed John and Ebo out the door. Ebo led us past the guards, who were now on the floor. I didn't see blood, but who knew what conditions the guards were in? I gave a mental apology to them as we left the detention center. When we got into the hallway, Ebo pocketed the pistol and led us to the nearest lift. Is it here? Asked John. Ebo nodded. We got into the lift and went a short distance to the outer docking ring. There were several airlocks here with different company and personal names. We went past the Genovian Union one, crossing the bulkheads between each airlock, until we reached one labeled Yaratech. Them too? I asked, and John just smiled. He motioned us to stay out of sight of the airlock, then went over to the palm plate and put his hand on it. The airlock opened, and a Musashi pilot was standing there with a sealed bag. He handed the bag over with a bow, then went back into the shuttle and closed the airlock. John turned, and suddenly the emergency sirens came on, and the bulkheads started to come down around the Yaratech airlock. John's eyes widened, but he didn't hesitate and threw the bag under the bulkhead before it was shut completely. John! I yelled, but it was too late. The bulkhead sealed, and there was a series of percussive blasts. There was another thud, then a ringing silence. I pounded uselessly on the door, then yelled, Fuck! Ebo pulled out a picket, and then he pushed one side of it and said, Tell me you picketed him. Yes, sir, but it was too late. He hit the top of the airlock on the way out. The soldier sounded like he was about to lose his lunch. Take him home, Ebo ordered. Yes, sir, the soldier said. Is that one of the good pickets? I said. Ebo nodded. I picked up the sealed bag. Right, do you know where the skiffs are in UI? Wait, don't answer that, just get us there, okay? Yes, sir, he said. I'll jump first to secure the room. Then I'll send it for you. I nodded, too angry to argue. Fucking Chaos recognized him, I thought. That bastard should have known. When the picket touched my shoulder, I then thought, fuck, he did know. He was bait. Asshole, I whispered as the picket jumped me. David. We entered the skiff bay and Rebecca steered us toward skiff 1. She palmed it open and ordered the guards to wait outside. I followed her in and closed the door behind us. What is this all about, David? She asked. I put my finger to my lips, then reached into my pocket, pulling out a picket. I pressed the thumb pad and it buzzed. "Secure," I said. Rebecca raised an eyebrow and watched as the picket hovered around the room. She jumped as there were several pops from the ceiling, and then went pale at the implication of what those pops were. The picket circled the room once more, then came back to my hand and chirped twice. "Now we can talk." "What the fuck is going on, David, and why do you have Survey Tech?" "You know how we've been seeing some third-party actors supplying money and information to the remnants of the New Harmonists and other criminal organizations?" She nodded. "Well, Survey found it. John Smith, the man you put in jail, and Bill Evans kidnapped me in order to ask for UI help in fighting it. They have a solution, which we need to help deploy, because they don't have enough people. It can only be deployed by hand, and we're running out of time." "What is it?" "To put it simply, it's a program we call Chaos that was originally meant to play the markets a bit for its creator and create an income. Unfortunately, it got out of their control and started manipulating the markets by any means necessary. It's been running for around 15 years. She widened her eyes. "The New Harmonists?" "It wasn't a New Harmonist that made it, but it put New Harmonists in positions of power and funded other extremists. Thankfully, most of that problem was solved for us." The director sat down hard. "Fucking hell. Then all those disappearances over the years?" I nodded. "Probably not all of them, but a lot of them. And the shuttle accident that took out Director Vino and her deputy, allowing Miller to take over. It's killed and blown several Survey agents already, including their most experienced agent." I didn't think her eyes could get any larger. "And this John Smith? Didn't you know he's the head of Survey Intelligence?" Her face went whiter. "Oh, shit. That John Smith?" "Fuck," she said. "You're right, I should have known. God damn it." She stood up and moved towards the door, but before she opened it, we heard a muffled yelling coming from outside the skiff. Rebecca opened the door to see the security guards in a circle around Ebo and Bill. Bill was holding a sealed bag. "Stand down," Rebecca ordered loudly, coming down the steps of the skiff. I followed, closing the door behind me. "But they just appeared out of nowhere, ma'am," said one of the guards. "I know who they are, and I'm authorizing them to be here," Rebecca said, more authoritatively than I've ever heard her be. "Now stand down." The guards did so. Ebo and Bill took a breath. Their faces told me something had happened. Before I could ask, the director turned towards me. "How many do we need?" 20, I said. "Volunteers." She nodded. The agent that worked the control booth of the skiff bay was watching the scene from his booth wide-eyed. Must be a rookie, I thought. Rebecca walked over to him. "How many available agents are in the compound?" He turned to his desk and tapped in the search. 50, ma'am. A third are off duty." "Call them into Skiff 10. "All of them, ma'am?" Rebecca gave him the look. "Yes, Agent, all of them. Special lecture and tell them no tech," she said. The man gulped and sent the message. I was impressed and relieved that Rebecca seemed to get the danger right away. Maybe I underestimated her, I thought. She turned to Bill and Ebo and asked, "Where's John?" Bill shook his head. Ebo was stony-faced. "Not here," Bill said. Rebecca paled, then said to me, "Secure Skiff 10 and bring your friends into it. I'll sort out the folks as they come in. Make sure they empty their pockets. Some won't pay attention." "I know," she said with a sigh, and ordered the guards back to their stations. I led the others into a skiff at the end of the bay. It could easily hold 100, but it was rarely used for that. Most of the time it was used as a classroom. I palmed it open, surprised to know that she hadn't canceled my biometrics, and led them inside. The door closed behind us, and I brought out the picket. "Secure," I ordered it again. It hovered, and there were pops around the ceiling and little wisps of smoke. I scanned the floor, and there were 2 more pops. It circled the room 2 more times, then came back and chirped. Where the hell is John? I asked again. He's dead, David. He got the bag from the pilot, and just as the pilot closed his hatch, the bulkheads came down and Chaos spaced him, Bill explained. What? I said in shock. He threw the bag under the door before it closed. I think Chaos knew who he was, or at least that John Smith was a dangerous element. I think John knew he was blown, David. Son of a bitch. A million implications ran through my head. Shit, is Sun Tzu going to be mad? Bill shrugged. Ebo shook his head. Not at you, sir. Sonny knows the risks of this job just as well as any of our agents. He will be angry about the loss, but if you finish the mission, he'll not come after Unity for it. That doesn't fill me with confidence, Ebo, I said. I can't give you any more than that, sir. AI emotions are complicated. Ebo shrugged. But, this isn't the first John Smith he's lost. Bill nodded. You two might want to secure the skiff bay, too. Shit. Ebo, can your picket do the same trick? I asked. Of course, he said. I motioned out of the skiff. Ebo stood in the middle of the skiff bay and ordered the pickets to secure the larger room. It took longer than the skiffs themselves and made some of the agents who had started coming in jump. Well, Chaos will know something's up for real now, I said. On Unity Hub, anyway, said Ebo. Right, I said. We went back into the skiff where agents were starting to mill around. A few waved to me and I nodded back. Bill found a chair in the corner and sat there with his head in his hands. I put a hand on his shoulder. You okay? I said quietly. Some days I hate this business, David, he said. I nodded. There wasn't anything to say, really. I found a chair myself and sat, waiting for the rest of the agents to arrive. After about 10 minutes, the room was full, and Rebecca came in and closed the door. She nodded to me, grabbed a chair, and sat on the other side of Bill. Ebo, I said, and we took out our pickets. I stood and rapped the old-fashioned whiteboard loudly. The talk in the room stopped. Okay, folks, these nano-pickets are going to secure the room. Just stay still. Secure, I told the picket, and it started floating in the room among the agents. Ebo activated his. There were a few pops and swearing, as tech-enhanced jewelry and other items were destroyed. I tisked. People, when the director says no tech, she means it. Come on now. A few of the agents had the grace to look ashamed. Rebecca stood up. The deputy director will give you the full briefing in a moment, but I want to stress that this is a volunteer mission. The actor we're up against has already killed Survey Intelligence agents, including, about 10 minutes ago, the director of Survey Intelligence himself. It has also outed and killed Unity agents. If you have a cover that you can't sacrifice, or you're needed for other ops that are ongoing, you'll probably need to leave the room. I'll also understand if some of you want to leave for other reasons. We need at least 20, but would like a few backups. A few did leave, and after things settled down, there are 35 people left. I sighed in relief. Rebecca locked the door behind the ones that left. This briefing is top secret and compartmentalized. This is especially important that nothing said in this briefing leaves this room. Deputy, she said. All right. What we're fighting isn't a who, but a what, which is a computer program called Chaos. It is a genetic algorithm that acts like a bacteria, which has an intelligence to it and an extreme sense of self-preservation. Some of you may know that we've been looking for the third party who funded the New Harmonists. Well, Chaos was that third party. A lot of eyes went wide, then angry as I continued explaining the plan. Later, when they were paired off and given their data keys by Bill, there was a look of determination on all of their faces. Be very careful. Chaos already suspects something and could come after you at any time. Outside this room, you should act as normal as possible. Any questions? Person towards the middle raised their hand. Did this Chaos kill Director Vino? We believe so, but can't prove it. They nodded, looking very angry. I didn't blame them for that. Any other questions? I waited a minute, but no one answered. I turned to Rebecca, who nodded. "Good luck," I said. "Dismissed." The agents filed out. I watched them leave, wondering if all of them would be coming back. I felt someone next to me. "This is the worst part of our job, the waiting," Rebecca said. I nodded, then looked at her. "I think I've underestimated you," I said. She chuckled. "I'm older than I look," she said. "What?" I said, looking at her. She winked. "I went to Survey for medical reasons when I was a young woman. In order to control a genetic disease, I needed the same type of bots that Survey librarians get. The thing is, it slows the aging process. I was a Survey asset for years until they cut ties after the new Harmonists were killed. I wasn't sure if your John Smith was the John Smith, but when you confirmed it in the skiff, then I knew we had an emergency." "But why play the idiot?" A smile on her face was predatory. "Fooled you, didn't I? Besides, I was a Senate appointee. I needed to run interference so you could rat out the last of those fanatical assholes. Good job on that, by the way." "Thanks, ma'am," I said and nodded. The room had cleared except for me, Ebo, Rebecca, and Bill. Rebecca patted my arm. "I'd better see to the rest of today's schedule. I'll have to put a reprimand in your file for deserting for the last couple of weeks, but I'll think of something not so bad. Maybe saying you were working a job and forgot to come home." She walked towards the door. "Oh, and we'll need to go before the Senate Intelligence Committee eventually, David, once we have the results." "Joy," I said sarcastically as she left the skiff. I turned back to Ebo and Bill. "Well, folks, now we wait." 1 month, said Bill. "I hate Unity Hub." "I could think of some interesting things to do, Bill," said Ebo with a wicked grin. "Jesus Christ, son, I could be your grandfather," the other man said. "So? Your boss just died. Don't you have things you should be doing?" "Yes, well, I do, but I could use some comfort," said Ebo with a wide smile. Bill just shook his head. The other man shrugged. "Oh, well, good night, sexy Bill, director," he said, and left the skiff. I tried not to laugh. "You have your key?" Bill asked. I nodded and patted my chest. "I'll shower with the damn thing." "Do you think if we acted like old friends come back from holiday, we could go have a nice dinner?" he asked. "Probably best to stay in the compound, Bill," I replied. "Yeah." He rubbed his hands through his hair. "I like that asshole, David. I want to deploy that key." "We'll do it together," I said. He nodded. "Right. I need a beer. Come up to my office. I need to send the asset data to Musashi, but my printer can make you a decent beer while you wait." Bill nodded, and we, too, left the skiff. Chapter 45. Ray. I read the paper again with the information in my UI contact. Whithaven was a small colony, and the capital city of Beckett wasn't all that large either, which was worrisome. According to the briefing, Chaos would probably recognize me as an outsider. I sighed. 2 minutes to entry, said Sneha, my pilot. "Right," I said and strapped in. We landed 15 kilometers outside the city limits in a forested area away from the farmlands. "What's the time here?" I asked, as she shut down the engines and I got out of my chair. I had a wristcom that only showed time. It was strange that it didn't do anything else, but it couldn't be helped. 10 local time. We're in an area popular with hikers and backpackers, so your cover should be good to go. You have 20 hours before the deadline. Right. There's a main road about an hour's walk from here. It's mostly used by farmers, but they don't mind giving lifts to hikers to the capital. She smiled. I lived here for a while. I grinned back. Thanks for the tip. Any local wildlife I should be wary of? Nah. There's mosquito-like bugs, but they don't spread disease. Most larger fauna are herbivores. The predators are mostly birds that go after rodents. The birds are huge and more dinosaur-like than bird-like, but usually avoid humans. Okay, right. I'll see you soon. Sneha held out a hand, and I took it. Then she opened the door of the demon. I pulled out my tablet so I could refer to my offline map. I confirmed my direction and headed out. When I got to the road Sneha had told me about, there was a farmer with a truck full of produce, both earth varieties and the blue-tone native vegetables, coming in from the farming settlements. I flagged him down. "Hi there," they said. "You lost or something?" "Yeah, kinda. I was backpacking my way back to the capital and lost track of time. I need to meet a friend in the city in a couple of hours." "Well, come on then. It's about 25 minutes from here. You're not too far off." "Thanks so much. I'm staying at the Green Man Hostel." I got in the passenger seat of the truck and put my backpack at my feet. "Oh yeah, it's on my way. I can drop you off." He pushed the start button on the truck and trundled down the road. "You been in the bush for long?" he asked. "About a week. I'm trying to backpack most of the outer colonies. My friend Dylan thinks I'm bonkers, but you don't get the all-colony plaque by staying home." "Ah, Unity Mountain Club then, eh?" "Yep." The farmer laughed. "I had a few friends who tried. They ran out of money about halfway through. I don't think they planned well, and some of them are just there to planet hop and drink." "Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. Personally, I like the solitude. Woodhaven is the first of the outer colonies for me." The farmer nodded, but was quiet as he navigated the sharp turn in the road. When the road straightened out again, he said, "Not a bad first choice. The weather here is usually good and not too hot. The blue plants are a bit weird, but a lot of them are actually edible considering. I got some tubers in the back, which are bright blue but taste like cheese. It's not really starchy like earth tubers, but you can eat it raw." "Really?" I asked, and the farmer went into a long ramble about local produce and the effectiveness of hybrids. I let him talk, making appropriate affirmative noises as we reached the capital. He navigated the streets and pulled up in front of a large building with a Green Man picture hanging outside of it. "Here you go. Oh, I never got your name," the farmer said as I got out and pulled on my pack. "Reagan," I said. "Well, have a good time, Reagan, and hope you get that plaque." "Thanks, I hope so too. Have a good one," I said and shut the door. The farmer trundled off and I went into the hostel. The person at the front desk was a short, fat woman with tattoos and a welcoming smile. "Hi, welcome to the Green Man. How can I help you?" "I'd like a room for the night, please. A single if you have one." I pulled out a silver credit chit and handed it to her. I grimaced. Sorry, I only have chits. My wristcom broke while I was hiking, and all I can do now is tell the time." "Well, thankfully you had the good sense to convert some of your credits to chits, then. There's a wristcom dealer a couple blocks from here if you want to get a new one." "Thanks. I'll do that later. Although, I just want a bath and a nap." "That I can help you with," she said with a smile. "Just sign this, and I'll give you your card key. I know it's a little old-fashioned, but it keeps costs down. You'll have your own bathroom, but no food printer." I nodded. "That's fine." I signed the paper and took the key. "Third floor, room 306. "Great," I said, hefting my pack. When's lunch?" "Lunch is self-served from the communal printer in the dining hall, so whenever you want, really. Dinner is home-cooked and served from 6 to 9. "Great, thanks." I smiled at her, then went up to my room, took off my heavy pack with a grateful sigh and opened it. Rummaging through it, I found the nanopicket I had brought with me. I powered it on and said, "Secure." It floated around the room, and a pop came from the ceiling before it came back to my hand and chirped. "Thank God for outer colony Luddites," I said to the room. I took a shower and changed, grabbed a paperback book, and made my way down to the dining hall. The data key I kept around my neck. I had memorized the name of the contact and the date. I ordered a sandwich and soup from the printer, then sat down at a far table and started to read my book. Happily, most people took that as a hint and left me alone. About a half an hour later, a person came in looking around at the tables. She saw me and the book I was reading about forests and the colonies and made her way to my table. "Reagan," they said, acting as if we were long-lost friends. "Julia!" I got up and gave her a hug. "It's so good to see you. It's been so long." "I know. Oh, right. Did you actually marry David? I said, giving her the deputy director's name as a sign of who I was. Nah, he met a guy named John and went off colony hopping after we graduated. Now I do river tours when I'm not working in the capital offices. I smiled at her use of the countersign. That's too bad. I thought you two were good for each other. Oh well, things happen. So, now that you're here, what do you want to do first? I thought for a moment. Well, today I'd like to chill, but tomorrow how about a tour of the city? Alright, not much to see though. That's okay. I've been in the woods for a week, so anything that looks like a city will be exciting for me. I laughed. Julia smiled. Fair enough. Have you had lunch? I asked. No, not yet. The printer is usable here if you want to join me. But you're pretty much done with yours, she said. Yeah, but you're the first person I've really talked to in a week. Humor me? Julia smiled wider. Okay. She got up and went to the printer. I sipped my coffee and watched her. This assignment isn't going to be so bad, I thought. The next morning, Julia and I woke up in my room at dawn. She was laying in the crook of my arm. Morning, I said. She grinned sleepily. Morning. Well, that took a definite turn, although not that much a surprise from someone from Survey. They didn't say much when I got the notice you were coming, just that someone was coming in a date range. I pointed to the data key around my neck. This is why. It's a countermeasure for a rogue computer program that's infected the colonies. We need to get into the main colony computer and just insert the key. The program will defend itself, though. Defend itself as in dead people, right? I nodded. Julia sighed. She rolled on top of me and kissed me, then rolled to the other side of the bed and got up. I could use a shower, she said, and wiggled her hips. Coming, I said with a laugh, getting out of bed. We managed not to fool around too much in the shower, had breakfast, and left the hostel. About an hour before we needed to deploy the data key. Listen, I said before we left the room, if anything happens to me, about 15 clicks from here is a survey demon with a pilot. My tablet has the map. I'll let the hostel lady know that you can come and get my stuff. Let them take you off planet, okay? And if we die together? Well, they leave after a solar day. We walked out of the room and headed towards the Capitol building where the main server was. The walk wasn't long, and the city itself was beautiful, as Julia showed me points of interest. The city was a bit Earth European in style, and you could see mountains in the distance. When we got within a block of the building, Julia said, "Go around back and wait there." I nodded and slipped into the alleyway while she went through the front with her credentials. I kept close to the wall, out of sight of the cameras. I patted the pocket of my cargo pants where my sword hilt was stowed and practiced some breathing exercises while I waited. Eventually, the service entrance opened, and Julia let me inside. I pulled out the nanopicket. "Secure as we traveled," I ordered it, and it floated towards the ceiling, making pops as we went. Julia walked as if she belonged there, and I followed her, trying to look like I was a new employee or something. There weren't many people in the basement of the building, and we were able to reach the computer room relatively quickly. Julia opened the door, and we slipped in. I took the key and went to the nearest console, which was halfway down the server stacks. As I started to insert the data key, the fire alarms went off, and the door slammed shut. "We have 10 seconds until the nitrogen goes off," Julia yelled over the noise. "Get the breathers," I yelled. She ran for the emergency panel next to the door, but there were no breathers and a repair tag on each hook. "Fuck!" she yelled. I jammed the key into the data port and ran for the door. I pulled out my sword, activated it, and started hacking at the door, but it was too thick to cut through. I started feeling sleepy. Julia slid to the floor. I dropped my sword and joined her. I took her hand, and then the world went black. Bill. "Ugh, pressure suits," I grumbled as David checked my suit and helmet. Well, you could go without it if you want to freeze to death, he said. Okay, check mine. I turned and checked his suit, making sure all the seals and straps were secure, and that he had his helmet fully on. You're good, I said. Got your copy? He asked. I nodded. You got yours? Yup. He looked at his wristcom. Okay, let's get this done. We climbed up the ladder to one of the maintenance tubes closest to the computer core. When the gravity eased up, we started pulling ourselves up the tube until we reached the core tunnel. We were 100 meters from the core when the lights went out. We turned on the lights on our helmets. Just as David crossed the section bulkhead, the bulkhead door slammed shut, narrowly missing his feet. I saw him yell something in his helmet. I turned on the direct suit comms. You okay? He nodded. That was way too close, he said. Yeah, fucker's on to us. David looked at the other bulkhead door. Well, we'll have to open all the doors manually. Thankfully, they're actually manual and not electric. Let's get on with it, he said, opening a panel next to the door and pulling the lever. It took him a full minute to pull it, but then the door opened and we shot through. Thankfully, it stayed open. How many doors? I asked. 3. I sighed. I'm too old for this shit. Alright, let me get the next one. I pulled the lever down, which was harder than I realized. We alternated doors until we reached the core. The computer core was a large cylinder connected to the rest of the station by a column on top and bottom, with many wires connected to the walls from the middle of the cylinder. There's data ports all over it. Whoever gets there first puts the key in, right? David said. Right, I said. I grabbed one of the wires connected to the wall and pulled myself along, hand over hand. David did the same, and we slowly made our way to the core. After a few moments, when I wondered if chaos had given up, there was a flash, and David yelled, and the comms cut off. David! I rolled over and saw his suit floating between the wires. I was tempted to go over to him, but instead I tried to move faster. I reached the core and pulled off the key from my suit, found the nearest port and shoved it in. Then I put my feet next to the core and pushed. There was an arc that touched my boot, making my leg tingle, but otherwise I was fine. Take that, you fucker, I yelled, uselessly in my helmet. Then made my way over to David. When I reached him, I pulled him over to me with one of the straps on his suit. The suit panel showed red. Shit, I said, and didn't think about it. I pulled him with me as I made my way through the core door and back through the rest of the core tube. When we reached the first bulkhead, I used the manual lever and closed the door behind us. Then I used the manual lever to open the original door. When it opened, a unit of fleet security was waiting for us. I punched the suit comm to activate the public channel and said, I'm Bill Evans of UI, and this is Deputy Director David Vergara. He needs medical attention. Sir, we were told there were terrorists in the core. It was a fake tip. Now shut up and get Vergara to the medbay. His suit's busted. Call the UI director. She'll vouch for us. The lead officer nodded, still looking confused as he called for a med team. He motioned one person forward, who looked at the suit and pulled his oxygen tube out of it and attached it to David's suit. He waited for a few seconds, then had one of the others reattach it. They pulled David down the core. The original officer turned to me. Mr. Evans, you've been vouched for. What were you two doing in the core? Son, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, I said. The man shook his head. Fucking UI, he said, not realizing he'd left his comms on. I heard that, I said with a smile, and followed the officers out of the core. Athena. I stood outside the pottery shop, washing the windows. I groaned. This is Sid work, I complained in my head. I didn't dare say anything more to Helena, since she was already mad at me for knocking over the greenware rack. Sighing again, I dunked the rag into the vinegar solution and started on the next pane. I should have been more assertive about going with Jana to do my apprenticeship. At least I'm friends with her. But no, Helena is the best potter in the capital. Mother said I couldn't go to a second-rate Potter. Not her daughter. I shook my head. Thanks, Mother, for making my life miserable, and thanks, Mommy, for not sticking up for me. I sighed again and scrubbed the windows with a bit more vigorously, wondering if I should quit with Helena after I got initiated and go to Jana anyway. Mother would throw a fit, but at this point I didn't care. After initiation, I had the right to go to a new family, and she couldn't do anything about it. That thought made me smile. It was still early, and the street was quiet, so when the strangers came down the road, I turned to look at them. There was a woman and a Sid, but the Sid had no collar on. I stared at them, and after a moment, they noticed me. "Alan," said the woman, tapping the Sid on the shoulder and pointing at me. He turned, then slowly walked up to me. "Excuse me," he said. We're looking for the Central Library?" I widened my eyes. A Sid? Talking to me? What the hell? I started to say, when Helena came out of the shop. She pointed her short crossbow at the Sid. "Get inside, Athena. Go to your room and close the curtains. I don't want you to see you looking out here. You're not initiated yet." "But," I said. Helena turned her dark eyes to me. "Go to your room," she ordered. "The matriarch and her team will handle this. Now go." I didn't hesitate and bolted for the shop, running up the stairs to my room. Helena watched as I closed the blinds, but when she turned to talk to the two strangers, I opened my window a bit and set my tablet's camera to the window, setting it to record. "Who are you?" said Helena. The Sid started to reply, but Helena ignored him. "I don't listen to Sids." "We're from out of town and we're looking for the Central Library. We're not here to cause trouble." "Sids aren't allowed in the library," said Helena, and the woman looked confused. Didn't she know that? I thought. What woman doesn't know that? "You should know that if you're from Diana," Helena said, pointing the crossbow at both of them. The strangers both put up their hands. Helena stared at them, keeping the crossbow on them. The woman was standing on the balls of her feet, looking as if she was ready to fight Helena, but the Sid looked at her and said, "Val, no." "But," the woman started to say, but then there was a sound of hoofbeats, and the matriarch and 6 other women came up riding up. The badges on the others were all from the Protection Collective. Holy shit, I thought. Who are these people that they have to send the collective after them? "You can go back into your shop, Helena. Thank you for calling," said the matriarch. Helena nodded, lowering her crossbow, but she only stepped back to the shop door. I didn't hear her come in. Nosy bitch. Always has to have the latest gossip. "Not that you're much better, Athena," a part of my brain reminded me, as I looked through the tablet at the action below. The matriarch faced the woman. "Who are you, and why is your Sid uncollared?" "I'm from out of town. We're just going to the library," she said. "You didn't answer the question. Why is your Sid uncollared?" Shit," she said, and slapped her wristcom. "Hold them," ordered the matriarch, and the collective soldiers who had dismounted went over to them, one of them carrying a Sid collar and a lead. The strangers looked at each other and then tried to run. The Sid threw something into the alleyway next to the shop, but before he could get too far, the collective tackled him and the woman. They collared the Sid and held on to the woman, who was still struggling to get out of their grasp. One of the other collective soldiers punched her in the stomach, knocking the wind out of her. They pulled her wristcom off her wrist and handed it to the matriarch, who examined it. "Off-worlder spies," the matriarch said with a snarl. "We don't take kindly to spies here," she said. "It was a Unity spy who killed our greatest mothers. Are you here to ruin our society again?" The woman shook her head. "No, we're not here for that." "Then what are you here for?" At that moment, 2 booms rang out of the sky. The woman smiled, then looked at the Sid. "Sorry, Alan." The Sid shook his head, and one of the soldiers pulled on the leash. giving him a shock that I could hear. He screamed and double-overed in pain. The woman stood straight up and looked at the matriarch with pure hate. "You'll regret this," she said. The matriarch dismounted from her horse and unhooked her crossbow from the saddle. She pointed it directly at the woman's chest. "Somehow I doubt that. Spy and traitor to women. Spies are executed on sight on this world," she explained, and then pulled the trigger. The woman looked shocked for a moment, let out a breath, and fell to the ground. I put my hand over my mouth to keep from making any noise as I watched in horror. "They always tell us that we don't kill other women, that women are all precious flowers of humanity. Why did she kill her, even if she was a spy?" I stayed frozen by the window. The matriarch handed her bow to one of the other soldiers, then went over to the Cid, grabbing his face and looking at his teeth. "You're a fine specimen of a Cid. Good genetic stock. Take him to the stables," she ordered. The soldiers that were holding him led him to a horse and put him over one of the horses like a sack of grain. The ones that were holding the woman did the same with the body. They mounted and left, leaving one of the collective and the matriarch. "Good call, Helena. Is your apprentice all right?" "She's in her room. The Cid only talked to her, nothing more." Matriarch nodded. "She's lucky that Cid wasn't in a rage." "True that. She's close to her initiation, too. Don't need Cids thinking they can take advantage, especially off-worlders." "Right," said the matriarch, who went back to her horse and mounted. Her wristcom chimed. "What is it?" "There's a vessel heading out of the system that we detected coming off the planet. Should we alert station?" "Yes, but wait until I get back. I'll need to give them details." She turned back to Helena. "Good day, Helena. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the district fair." "Thank you, matriarch," Helena said, as the matriarch left. I carefully and quietly pulled the tablet out of the window and closed it, then hid the tablet under my pillow. I took a few deep breaths to steady myself so I could pretend that I hadn't seen anything. I heard the shop door open, and Helena yelled, "Athena, finish the windows." I obediently yelled back, "Yes, Helena," and ran outside to the abandoned bucket. Helena watched me as I dunked the rag back into the vinegar solution and started scrubbing again. She watched me for a few minutes, then went back into her studio. After scrubbing a few more minutes, I stopped and snuck over to the alley where the Cid had thrown the wristcom. I scanned the ground, then saw the abandoned wristcom and a data key. I picked them up and put them in my pocket, then went back to the windows. Later that night, I took out my finds and examined them. The wristcom only had a timer on it and was flashing all zeros. I pressed the buttons on it, but it didn't do anything. I picked up the data key and put it in my tablet, then suddenly the tablet popped and fizzed and a trailer of white smoke came off it. "Shit!" I said, dropping it on the floor with a thud. I was grateful for the rug under my bed. What the hell? I stared at the dead tablet. My world was shattered. I didn't know what to do. Jana had been right. Not all women were good, even the ones on Diana. I have to get out of here, I thought. Helena just stood there and watched as the Matriarch killed a woman in cold blood. No, I need to talk to Jana, and I need to know what the hell is going on. This is all wrong. Very wrong. That decided me. I pulled out my backpack and started filling it. I even wrapped my damaged tablet in a headscarf and put it at the bottom of the bag. Thankfully, I'd been in the shop long enough to know all the ways to get out of it without Helena knowing. This morning just confirmed what a cold-hearted bitch she was, and I was done. I opened the back door quietly and slipped out into the night. Goddess help me, I thought. I always will, my fire child, came the familiar voice of Goddess in my head. It made me smile because I knew her approval meant I was doing the right thing. Chapter 46. Marcus. The waiting is the worst, I said one night at dinner in Jenny's quarters on Musashi, about a month and a half after all the ships had left with their operatives. The deployment date had come and gone, but we had only heard from the inner colonies. They all deployed successfully, and all of our agents had survived, although there had been some narrow escapes. Mix Musterman sent a report from New York Colony with an account of them and the UI agent getting mugged before they could reach the server. The UI agent was in good condition, thankfully, and Mix Musterman was staying with them. Chaos was trying hard, but it seemed to not be succeeding at causing too much damage. "I know what you mean," she replied. It was only a matter of time before the closest outer colony teams came back. She looked worried and thoughtful. Taking a deep breath, she picked at her salad. I ate my dinner more out of necessity than hunger. "Apprentice, I have an urgent picket from Lucifer. The Admiral collapsed during the first negotiation session. You are needed immediately," said Musashi into the quiet as we ate. Terror floated across Jenny's face, replaced by a stony mask. "Understood. Have the XO put out a beacon for the returning demons. Marcus, you'll need to go back to Sun Tzu." I nodded and put my fork down. "Makes sense. Musashi-sensei, is there a demon I can use?" "Yes, Marcus. Also, I have just received a picket from Sun Tzu. John Smith is dead. The new John Smith says you are to return immediately. I will send a pilot to get the demon ready." Jenny stared at me as the shock of what Musashi had said hit me. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, too." We both stood up and hugged each other. Jenny pulled back, held my shoulders for a moment, nodded, then started to walk out of the room. "Get me the XO and the Abbot, Mia. Jump as soon as Marcus has left." Her voice faded as she left the room. Musashi-sensei, should I put our dishes in the recycler?" I asked. No, Marcus. We have cleaning bots for that. Just go to airlock 10, please. We need to be on our way." I didn't worry about my clothes in my room, as I knew it didn't matter. I ran to the airlock and got in the demon. The pilot acknowledged me and said something about how long the trip was, but I wasn't really paying attention. John Smith was dead. 2 days later, I boarded Sun Tzu through one of the outer airlocks. I said goodbye to the pilot and climbed through. Waiting for me was Bill. "Bill?" "Hello, Marcus," he said soberly. We stood in the hallway staring at each other for a moment. "How?" I asked. "We think Chaos saw him as a threat and John knew it." Bill looked away for a moment, then said, "He had just taken the delivery of the data keys when the decompression alarms went off. He threw the bag to me, then the door shut and the airlock blew open and..." "Fuck," I said. "Yeah, to put the cherry on the shit Sunday, the deputy was damn near electrocuted when we did the Unity hub core." "Fuck, is he okay?" Bill nodded. "He'll need physical therapy, and they're watching for other neurological problems, but he should recover and be back to work in a few weeks." He paused. "Walk with me for a bit. Johnny Smith has given you the next couple of days off. She's pretty adamant that we can get along without you for that long." "We?" "Sonny and Johnny offered me a job, and I decided to take it. David wanted me to work with him, too, but I hate Unity Hub. Sonny made me a better offer. So, I'm the new John Doe. Although I'd rather go with JD. I stopped. "You're kidding. I thought that was John Smith's second command and his successor." "Usually that's the case, but according to your new John Smith, they need someone with Unity ties right now. Apparently she can have an apprentice that doesn't have the John Doe title, so she's considering her options. I'll still be her second in command, though." "Oh." He started walking again. "It's weird that he's gone." "You never forget who really recruited you," Bill said. "No, I suppose not," I said with a grin. Bill returned it. "So, my first order to you as your new boss is to go and find Blake. I'll be keeping track of the incoming agents for now. There's still time before we tally the butcher's bill." "All right," I said. Bill, now JD, turned and went in the other direction. Instead of going to the servants' quarters, I went to the memorial hall. There, the names of all the agents killed in the line of duty were engraved into the black marble walls. I hadn't come here when Levy died, but now I had to see for myself. As I entered the hall, light glimmered from windows mounted high on the walls. Sun Tzu's symbol was inlaid on the floor in a gray stone, and the names on the wall were filled with gold. The room was only partially filled with names from the last 500 years. I slowly walked to the end of the list. I touched Levy's name, and a lump formed in my throat. The next name was John Smith, T.B., followed by 2 other names I didn't recognize. I assumed that chaos had killed them, too. Sonny, what are the initials after John Smith? Those are the initials of his real name. We do that to distinguish the different John Smiths, he replied. Are you sad, Sonny? I mourn all of them, Marcus. I don't know if it's sadness as humans experience it. I miss their presence, even the agents that I haven't seen for decades. Time moves differently for me. I do miss John, especially for Control's sake. They had known each other for a very long time. I nodded in understanding. I stared at the names for a long time. Somehow I felt I had to. After what felt like hours, I heard footsteps come into the hall and stop next to me. A familiar hand slipped into mine and held it firmly, but gently. Their hand in mine seemed to open up my heart. That could have been me, I said. I know, Blake said, but it wasn't. Yeah, but maybe I should have been on Unity Hub. He squeezed my hand. You were doing what you needed and were ordered to do, and so was John. He died doing his job, a job that he loved, which was his true vocation. The only thing you can do is mourn, then continue the work you and John started. And when it gets too much, you have me. And if I die? I asked, turning to face them. I will mourn you for a long time, and try to remember you and the love we shared with joy. I love you, Blake, I said to them, putting my forehead to theirs. I love you too, Marcus, they said quietly, putting their arms around me and holding me tight. Jenny. I picketed into the hallway of the hospital on Lightbringer, where the Admiral was in a coma. The abbot had come with me. We both went into his room, where one of the monks on the negotiation team was reciting prayers next to his bed. A nurse was turning off the machines around his bed. My heart fell to my feet. The nurse finally saw us and came over. He just passed, apprentice, abbot. Take as long as you need. She stood aside and let us fully in the room. As I came closer to the bed, the noise around the room seemed to fade away. Behind where the Admiral's body lay, a figure appeared. The figure sharpened and looked down at the body on the bed. Well, it said. It sounded like the Admiral. They looked at me, and their face became clearer. Dark brown, healthy, with a light in his eyes that I hadn't seen since I left for New Harmony. Take care of my soldiers, Admiral, he said to me. I will, I said, as a light formed behind him. The Buddha appeared beside me and then walked over to the Admiral. He gave me a smile, then took the Admiral's hand and went into the light. I felt tears on my face, then blinked, and the light, the Admiral, and the Buddha were gone. While I was saying goodbye, the room had filled with orange-robed monks, chanting prayers for the dead and preparing the body. The abbot was watching me. Jenny, are you all right? He said quietly. I saw him. And the Buddha. They went into this light, I replied, staring at the body in a daze. I turned to the abbot. What does it mean? The abbot had a complicated look on his face. You saw the former admiral leave this life and move on to the next. I nodded, not sure how to take that. A monk entered the room with a cloth-wrapped bundle. The abbot took it and dismissed the other monk, who joined the others around the bed. There is no formal ceremony when the leadership is passed, except for the outgoing admiral giving the new admiral their sword. His will be placed in the Great Hall in Musashi. He had this made for you a year ago. He bowed over the sword and handed it to me in his palms. I took it with shaking hands, like I did when the admiral had sent his sword to Sun Tzu, and unwrapped it. I gasped. The scabbard and hilt wrapping were finely crafted of black leather with the Musashi symbol in gold on the pommel. The scabbard itself had a phoenix on both sides, worked in red and gold and white, with rubies for eyes. "Mia," I said in my head. "He thought the phoenix was a fitting symbol for you," the AI explained. This is amazing, Mia. Thank you," I said with awe. "You're welcome, Admiral. The abbot needs to talk to you now." I nodded and belted on the sword. I wiped my eyes, took a breath, and cleared my throat. "Thank you, Abbot." They nodded, taking up the sword's cloth wrapping. "You'll need to wear the white kimono and wrap your sword in white for the next 49 days. You can wear mourning clothes for up to a year by custom, if you wish to. The former admiral will be cremated later today, and we'll have the interment of his ashes in a week. You'll need to make the announcement now. Everyone will know that you've taken command by the sword. Have you decided what you'll be called?" I looked him in the eyes. "I am the Admiral," I said, and walked out of the room. Chapter 47. The Admiral. "Mia, is Amy still awake?" I asked in my head as I walked towards the Admiral's meditation room. "Yes. Shall I have her meet you in the meditation room?" I nodded. "Tell her not to rush, though. It's not an emergency or anything." "Understood," Mia said. "She's an excellent choice." "I figured you'd approve. It's time she had more responsibility." "Amy says she'll be there in about 5 minutes. And yes, it's beyond time for her to take her 9th Dan test." "She hasn't done it already?" "No." That surprised me. "She's been 8th Dan all these years." "Yes." "She's old enough to be my mother. It's definitely well past time she took it." I shook my head again, and as I entered the meditation room, "What would be a viable scenario for her?" "Something planet-side," Mia said. "She has been on my ship for nearly 2 decades after her first dance ceremony. Control has said that there might be the necessity of a planetary action due to chaos. Sun Tzu concurs, but we are unsure of which of the outer colonies it will be." I frowned as I lit the candles around the statue of the Buddha. "That would be a difficult test." "So was yours," he pointed out. "You have a point," I said out loud. I lit some incense, pulled out a cushion for myself and for Amy, and then sat down and stilled myself. After a few minutes, the door opened. I heard Amy take off her shoes and pat over the carpet to stand in front of me. I opened my eyes. "Hello, Amy. Please have a seat." She bowed, then sat on the cushion I'd put out. It was strange having friends treat me with deference, although it looked as if Amy still wanted to give me a hug. I smiled at her. "I've missed being in the women's quarters with you," I said. The other woman relaxed. "I've missed you too," she said. "How are you?" I looked down at my hands and sighed. It's been hard. The old admiral and I got very close in his last days, and I miss him terribly. Damien and the vice admirals have been good to me, but I miss having one of my own friends by my side. Amy narrowed her eyes. "Oh, what do you mean by that?" "Well, Damien wants to retire to the planetside temple, and I need someone I know I can trust to fill his role." "Who are you thinking of?" I just gazed at her. Amy blinked. "Me?" I nodded. "But—" I raised my hand. "Don't tell me you can't do it. You've been head of the women's quarters for years. You know this ship as well as Mia, and you've been training novices for a lot longer than most other folks at 8th Dan have. I took a breath. Also, you've been a good friend and mentor to me, and I need you to continue to be that. I'm still young for this role, Amy. I need all the help and wisdom I can get, and a hug on occasion. I grinned. Amy stared at me with her mouth open, then closed it, then opened it again. She started laughing. Okay, as long as I can call you Jenny sometimes, she said, and hugged me. In private, sure, I said, chuckling, returning the hug. Talk to Damien tomorrow morning. He's agreed to stick around and train you. Amy nodded. We sat in silence for a moment. Are you really okay, Jenny? Strangely enough, I am, I replied. I told her about the vision of the Admiral I had on Lucifer when he passed. It helped me to see that, somehow. He seemed more at peace than I had ever knew him to be. I furled my legs and stretched them out, then said, But I'm worried about the aftermath of chaos and the negotiations. The negotiations have been pushed back a couple of months because of the Admiral's death, thankfully. So I won't have to be there for at least another couple of weeks or so, but I'm worried about losing a lot of people with the whole chaos thing. Chaos? She asked. Oh, right. Let me get you up to speed, I said, and gave her a short version of what chaos was and how it was being stopped. She was silent for several minutes after that. I just waited patiently. Shit, she finally said. I can see why you're worried. She thought for a moment. We could have a squad read in and on standby. Actually, since there's been problems, I'd say it should be our elite armored troops. I just smiled at the other woman. Mia? Yes, I concur. I have upgraded your permissions, Amy, and you should work with Damien to select your team. Right, Amy said, looking a little gobsmacked. Thanks, Mia, I said. To Amy, I said, Go get some rest. The first demons should be returning in the next few days. Amy nodded. You go get some sleep too, Admiral. Despite what others think, you are human. She smiled, stood, and bowed. As she walked out of the meditation hall, I said, Oh, and Amy. She stopped and turned around. Yes, Admiral? You'll be taking your 9th Dan test too, Mia, and I think you're long overdue. Amy took a deep breath. Jesus. Are you sure you're not possessed by the old Admiral? She shook her head, turned, and left. I just chuckled. Amy is correct, Admiral. You should rest, said Mia. I nodded, got up, and put the cushions away. I stood in front of the Buddha and bowed. As I straightened up, I heard the rattle of bones and jewelry. Be ready, the Buddha said, with a note that sounded ominous. I shivered and left the room. In the morning, the first of the outer colony demons started to return. Amy and Damien handled the check-in process as I studied material from the negotiation team. The history of the relationship between Earth and what became Unity and Survey was a fascinating read. We had learned about the Trinity Project in school, but I had no idea that the leaders of Earth had tried to destroy the station. It's no wonder that Survey keep to themselves, I thought. Are we sure we don't want to just leave Unity to themselves, Mia? No, Admiral. Unity and Survey are connected. We need each other, and Loki's people, too. Once we can open some sort of communication with them. Contrary to popular belief, the Creator was sad about having to cut off ties with Earth, even though it was necessary. Once they knew that Earth hadn't immolated itself, she wanted them to have the advancements that Survey had created. There were so many people in need on the planet. Unfortunately, Earth hadn't moved on much from the exploitation and greed, and that made things difficult between us. She hoped that by isolating Survey to an extent and encouraging immigration to Survey, that Earth would eventually come around to a more enlightened way of thinking. Information is a powerful tool. Earth hasn't changed yet, but the word is getting out about Survey from those who come here for medical treatment and schooling. All of us think long term. I suppose that makes sense, I said out loud. I went to the printer and ordered a nutrition shake. Earth is always home, even in the abstract, since we originated there. Yes, said Mia as the door to my office chimed. Come in, I said. Amy and Damien came into the office, faces sober. They didn't say anything, just handed me a tablet. I scrolled through the list of those returning, the list of the injured, and the list of the possibly dead. One name on the final list leapt out at me from the tablet. I read it again. I put the tablet down and closed my eyes. It was almost too much, coming on top of the Admiral dying. Have the deaths been confirmed? I managed to ask. Not all of them, but some. Their status is noted in the report. We still have about a third that need to report in, said Damien quietly. I nodded, stony-faced. Both of them started to look worried, but I ignored them. Mia, send a message to Sun Tzu and tell him we need to meet as soon as possible. I want the UI director and deputy on the call, too, I said. Yes, Admiral. Message sent. Dismissed, I said tersely. Amy looked as if she wanted to say something, but Damien stopped her, shaking his head. Yes, Admiral, they said in unison and left. I palmed the door closed from my desk and locked it. Nearly half of those who had gone on the mission were dead or severely injured. Ray was on the list of the dead. Taking up the pad again, I tapped her entry. Ray's death was confirmed by the Demon pilot. Against orders, they had monitored the planet-side news. Ray and the UI agent were found in the server room, suffocated by the fire suppression system. They were holding hands when they died. I read a few more of the confirmed death reports, which were almost all the same. The operatives were found in the main server room, suffocated. It was too much. I screamed and threw the tablet across the room, where it crashed with a mildly satisfying crunch. Mia didn't say anything, but I could feel that they mourned with me in their own way. I took out my sword and unwrapped the white cloth from it. Make me a sword with a plain white hilt, sheath, and belt, Mia. I put the sword the Admiral had given me in a drawer of one of the cases in the office. Understood, Mia said, and the printer began to print. You have been listening to Tales from Flat Space. If you want to support me in my writing, there are many ways to do it. Share this podcast, follow me on my Twitch channel, or buy my books. All you have to do is go to revgenapon.net and click on the relevant links. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.